and I farm from 2011 planted soybeans the first time. Thank you. It's a big privilege to be a farmer, but it's not always easy. And the challenges are many, and the risks are very high. When I started farming in 1995 with my family, in our district, in our area, there was just more than 100 crop farmers who produced more than 500 tons each at least. And in 20 years, from 1995 to 2015, more than half of them left the industry. So by 2015, we only had 52 grain farmers left in our area. And many of them, you couldn't say it was a size issue. Very big farmers, up to 8,000 hectares, 6,000 hectares, they left the industry, as well as small farmers. And small farmers were still going on, and other big farmers were still going on. So it wasn't a size thing, but it would have probably been an interesting study why so many farmers failed financially and had to leave the industry. But one thing all of us realized is that you have to continuously improve. You cannot just do what you did last year, or even much less 5 years ago. What was good enough 5 years ago is not good enough today. So we have to continuously be better. We have to continuously do more with less. We have to be more productive. I think one of the big things is it feels to me sometimes like we are running on a treadmill, and each year it gets one click faster, one click faster. And if you don't keep up, you fall off at the back. And this is what actually happened in our area, and I suppose it would be much similar all across the country. But the good thing is that the people that were left there, they ran much faster than they did 20 years ago, much more productive. And what helped us a lot was the introduction of soybeans. Now this morning, Dr. Erhard Briedenan put a big slide on here, showing what happened in the soybean industry the past 20 years, from 2003 until now. I think all of you here know the success story, know what has happened. And you know, in our country, we really are starved for good news, for success stories. And the soybean industry is one of them. Many people have contributed towards that success. I think the success in the soybean industry is an example what can happen when the whole value chain, from people that do research, people that supply inputs, farmers, extension officers, then past the farm gate towards grain handling, processing, up to the end user. One can see what can happen if the whole value chain works together. And today, as a soybean farmer, I take my hat off and I salute everyone that made a contribution towards building this soybean industry. Because of soybeans, I think I and many other farmers are still on our farms today and are able to farm. In 2019, of the 52 grain farmers in my area that was left from more than 100 in 1995, 20 was in dire straits. 20 of them couldn't get adequate production finance. And many started increasing soybean hectares. And the past 3 years, we were blessed with good climate. And in 2020, good harvest. 2021, also good harvest. And this season, possibly the best harvest ever. And of those 20 farmers, 19 have completely recovered from a situation where they were actually down and out to where they are back financially sound and looking forward to the future. And the role soybeans played in this cannot be underestimated. So today, as a grain farmer, everyone who was involved and responsible in any small or big way, through their own efforts or through the companies, I want to thank you very much. Just on behalf of the farmers that plant soybeans, but also for the country. You know what many of us don't realize is that we have a rapidly growing population. And at this stage, ladies and gentlemen, our country is food secure on a national level. Yes, of course, there are households who cannot afford food at this stage. But our maize and our soybeans are of the cheapest in the world. You must listen carefully, the cheapest in the world. You can buy maize in the country because we are at export parity. It's the world price, less the transport costs up to here. The difference this makes in a country with huge unemployment is tremendous. And we have food security today. We have abundance. We export maize. We have started exporting soybeans. But like everything in life, this is something we shouldn't take for granted. You know, many years ago, 20 years, 25 years ago, we had abundance of electricity. And yes, and we took that as granted. And today, what now? We have load shedding. So my plea to everybody here is, in the whole value chain, and this includes the government representatives that are here, we must be careful that in 20 years, 30 years' time, we don't have something like food shedding, where I eat today and not tomorrow, so that you can eat tomorrow and me not today. Think carefully about it, ladies and gentlemen. We have momentum in agriculture. That graph Dr. Bredenan showed you this morning, showed you in the soybean industry, especially in the oilseeds industry, we have momentum. For us to feed our growing population, we must think ahead. We must think 20 years, 30 years from now. Most probably, between 2050 and 2060, our population will double. So that's 30 years from now. It seems a long way off, but think back 30 years. 1992, where were you? If you think back towards 1992, that was not so long ago. And think ahead, twice the population we have today between 2050 and 2060. So the challenge is on agriculture. We have to be much better than we are today. We have to be much more productive than we are today if we are to feed this country, if we are not to have food shedding like we have load shedding today. So each one of us, the contribution is very important. So why do we have a day like this? Why does the oilseeds industry host something like this? To tell you the truth, the growth in soybean production was very good. We've had record yields the past 3 years. It went very well. But there's a dark cloud on the horizon. This season, where I farm, there was quite a few instances of problems with rhizobium, with inoculation not happening as it should happen. People buying from companies that have no track record, which sell very cheap, but the quality is dubious. People not knowing exactly how to handle rhizobium, buying a good quality product, but messing it up on the way to the field. Lots of things have happened, but there were instances where inoculation didn't happen as it should, and the impact on yields was very, very big. The damage towards that. So this is one part of the story. So we realized we don't know everything we know about rhizobium and inoculation. I think after the excellent presentations we've had, we see we still have a lot to learn. There's a lot of questions that are asked for which there are not answers. And we have to get those answers if we have to progress, if we have to keep the momentum we need to be better, to do more with less, to produce more. The second thing which became clear to us. Where we farm, it's a dry part of the country. And when we started farming with soybeans 10 years ago, we heard all the talk about Sclerotinia and what happens and how it looks, but we've never seen Sclerotinia. Then we started hearing Lichtenburg, Sclerotinia on the sunflowers. We started hearing Sannieshof, Sclerotinia on the sunflowers, and what devastating impact it had. But we just heard about it. We didn't see it where we farm. And then last season, some people started reporting, we've got Sclerotinia. We see some in the sunflowers, and we see here and there in the soybeans. And this season, this 2022 season, we had a very wet and cold March. It felt like we lived in the Cape during the winter in March. And all of a sudden, we had an absolute explosion of Sclerotinia on fields that have been always just planted maize, never planted soybeans or sunflowers. People have lost 300-400 hectare fields, 80%, 90% damage with Sclerotinia, harvesting 200 kilograms, 100 kilograms on fields that were supposed to give at least 2 tons of sunflowers. The same with soybeans. All of a sudden, we have been confronted with soybeans, with Sclerotinia on the soybeans. So slowly but surely, Sclerotinia worked its way. And we can now say, possibly there's nowhere left in South Africa where you are Sclerotinia free. And this is something that has to be addressed. Remember, we have to keep the momentum we have. We cannot let the ball fall now for the survival of the individual farmers on their farm, but for food security and for prosperity in this country as a whole. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is why we are grateful for today, and we say thank you to the organizers who have addressed this issue. And we think out of this day, a lot of initiatives will flow. You've seen the Sclerotinia network, things like that. And we ask you to stay involved, to become more involved, and to contribute where we need to. To work together was a big strength for the soybean value chain. And where we work for win-win solutions, you can see what has happened in the past 20 years. The privilege to plant and to have soybean sufficiency in the country, that didn't fall out of the sky. That didn't just happen by accident. It was through sheer hard work, clever work, planning, and working together, which is an example where government also played their role by being involved where they should and by staying away where they shouldn't be involved. So we are very grateful for the success story of soybeans. But there's a lot of work to be done in times to come. So anyway, we have the panel. If we can move on to the next slide. Thank you, Maria. We are open for questions and for discussions. You see the people we have here on the panel with us. Dr. Lisa, Dr. Nikki, Nelia Rousseau from Bayer, Dr. Rikus Kloppers from Cortiva, and SB Kutsia from FBI. So I open the floor to any questions. Please use the microphone, switch it on, and let us hear your questions. We have about half an hour for this discussion. So I think we have the best minds in our country on this issue here in front. We are privileged to have them here. So let's use it. So first question, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, Dr. Jan Dreyer.
Mr. Chairman, Lisa, you have extended experience in terms of Sclerotinia. What happened with minimum till or no-till type of situation as compared to conventional? Do they survive better, or what is your experience?
So I think I'm going to, in literature, maybe let me give some background on the sclerotia. Right, so we have no-till and conventional. And if we look at the sclerotia, it is a melanized mass of mycelium. So that's the white fluffy stuff that we see, the symptoms that we see on stems or on the sunflower heads. What happens is, as the season progresses, or as the disease cycle is completing. Hello, Lord. As the cycle is completing, what happens is these mycelium melanize and become the survival structure. And they can survive, there's even reports, 6 to 12 years. So there's an extended survival. And if we look at no-till and till, what happens if we have a season where we have Sclerotinia and we are practicing till? So in the previous season, you may have had Sclerotinia, and you might be bringing the sclerotia back up, right? But the reality is also the apothecia do not germinate more than 5 centimeters. The stipe, the little mushroom arm, if I call it that, doesn't germinate for longer than 5 centimeters. And so if it comes to looking at no-till and till, we actually should be asking someone that in the audience has already told us that they've been practicing no-till for 22 years. So maybe we can ask someone it's 10 years on my life. Have you seen significant differences between no-till and till practices?
Thank you, Dr. Lisa. Now, we've had sclerotia. Neighbors who till have sclerotia. We haven't seen any difference. The guy started plowing his fields. No difference. Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Jan, satisfied? Any more questions?
Okay, maybe, Joseph, if I can comment on this, and I think it's what Lisa says with, I think the sclerotia, if it sits on top of the soil, and it germinates. Once it forms that apothecia and it releases the spores, it's gone. The sclerotia is done. So what you actually need is to keep it on the top and stimulate it in some way to germinate and release spores without the presence of an host. Then you will have a success of reducing the number of sclerotia in your field. Easier said than done, yeah. But really, the disease pressure is all about the inoculum. So that has been observed in the past. Once you start plowing and deep working the fields, you actually bury the sclerotia. And that's where they survive. That's where they can survive for a very long time. And then you bring them up later. And I always say, sclerotia to me is a bit of an escape disease. It's not so much a resistance disease. We've seen it in breeding for years and years, efforts in breeding. And I've selected and screened soybean hybrids for years, and you can see little differences in the hybrids, but not significantly enough. The biggest factor was the escape factor. You think you plant 2 hybrids next to each other, and the one gets it, the other one out. It's a flowering date issue. It just escapes it. And I think it also escapes the memory of sometimes of people, because they think they've never had sclerotia, but it's because it survives in the soil for so long. And then can survive in maybe a host along the side, khaki boss, cosmos, everything that looks beautiful, but those are the hosts of the Sclerotinia, and you forget those things. And then suddenly one year you get it, and then it's everything, the seed and whatever you can blame. But it's been there. I think that's why I disagree with you. It's not here for the last 10 years. It's been here for the last 20 years. I've been in the Lichtenburg area and Grootpan areas, and I've observed it many, many years. It's been here for always.
Rikus, while you are busy giving an answer, maybe all of us that are here that are growing soybeans are also growing maize. And if you can compare the management practice to reduce Sclerotinia in comparison to Fusarium or Diplodia, I think this is one reason where farmers maybe in the past have thought with Diplodia, you have to bury them. Maybe if you can just talk about the differences between the management to reduce Diplodia or Fusarium and Sclerotinia, just to clear it up, please.
Yeah, Diplodia doesn't have that resting structure like Sclerotia. Sclerotia is much more a hardened type of structure that can survive for longer. The Diplodia issue is more of season to the next season, where it will sit in the debris and the residue. That's where it will survive. and infect the next year. So don't want to, you say I always bring the bad news, but I really predict that we're going to have a serious diplodia year next year. We've had 2 bad ones building up, and the next one, if the next one is a wet one, we're going to see a lot of diplodia again. You know, they come in these cycles. So, but yeah, as you say, the good news for the industry is the fact that the soybeans have crept into the western areas, because it's probably one of the best crop rotations that you can do for diplodia management. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. A question for Nelia Rousseau. Are there new products that are getting registered and coming to the market on soybeans that are likely to make spraying against Sclerotinia more effective? Is there going to be a silver bullet spray that can solve all the problems?
Joseph, I don't think there is something like that in agriculture. So it doesn't matter in which crop or what product you talk about, there's never a silver bullet, because you operate under climatic conditions that always play a role. But yes, I can confirm we have submitted a new solution that we've been working on, and we have good results to say that it really works, especially compared to what you have in the market at the moment. We have submitted already last year, so it's a matter of time. Perhaps you as an industry can push the registration along, but soybean. The work on sunflowers, which I expect would be a follow-up question, is a little bit more difficult, because on the sunflower you need to do the head rot as well as the stem rot. It's a more complicated development work that needs to be done. And the risk of not always knowing where the infection will be complicates the process as well.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes, Dr. Mickey Himon.
Thank you, Nelia. And maybe as a follow-up to that, so I'm by no means an expert in chemicals, but it seems like internationally there are a lot more products available than here in South Africa. So from discussions that we've had, we get the feeling that the reason for that is that Sclerotinia is such a difficult disease to actually get consistently in field trials, so that it actually becomes so expensive to do the product registrations. Can you maybe comment, is that your experience as well?
I'm sure Rikus also has an opinion about this, but yes, the problem is you don't know whether you'll get the disease in your field trials. So you can manage it, for instance, to start off your work in pot trials, where you can actually know whether your active actually works or not. You always have to balance between whether your product works and fighter on the crop as well. So we, from a Bayer perspective, have been playing with a lot of different products that you might have seen on a global front already in market. But our conditions, once again coming back to the climatic conditions, plays a role on how the chemistry, different chemistries will operate basically under local conditions. So there's a lot of factors to consider. There are other solutions in other countries, that is true. But your scope of actually knowing where you'll have the disease and whether you'll have the disease that specific season, and that's why it complicates it. And you also have to cover all the different climatic or critical climatic conditions in the work that you do. So there's a lot of factors to consider. And then if you start talking about inoculation of field plots, it becomes completely a different conversation to have, and that's why we have experts like the scientists here on the panel as well to help us with that, because then it becomes a complicated conversation to have. Rikus, please add.
Well, true. It's one of the most difficult trials that you can do. And actually, if you want to control your Sclerotinia on the farm, just put a little board in there saying Sclerotinia trial, and you will not get it, because that happens constantly. I think the other problem is also, there are very good products out there, and especially you go to East Europe and those countries, there's a lot of good solutions for sunflower, especially Sclerotinia and so on. And you go to South America, Brazil, but one of the other complications is still our hectares compared to those. For any company to invest in bringing a new product to the market, I showed you earlier this morning, you're taking a product from the start, $300 million US dollars to bring it to the market. So whenever you bring a product to the market, they look at your market, the potential, the business case, as we call it. So you have to justify the area, the disease pressure, and those type of things. So we unfortunately always in a situation that our area is still relatively small in soybean compared to Brazil or in Argentina or something like that, or go to Europe in terms of sunflower. So it really takes a lot of convincing, and I'm sure Nelia have the same problem as I want it. I can see the solutions, I can see it out there. But bringing it to the local market, the cost of the registration, the time that goes into registration, now going into GLP for regulatory, the cost extremely high to bring a product to the market. So it is just a big challenge. Tilavali, I expected your hand to go up.
Thank you. Question here in front.
It's not a question. I just wanted to make a comment. I think, Corne, we have worked very well with the Office of the Registrar when I was still...
Sorry.
I was saying to Corne, who was sitting at the back of myself here, that we have worked very well while I was still on the other side. But now I'm on the other side. So my proposal will be, let's lobby the registrar to classify some of these crops as minor crops, so that there could be an incentive in terms of the reduction in terms of data requirements. Because if that is done, at least you've got an incentive as a company to put minimal investment and also to bring international data to bridge that gap.
Thank you, Mr. Nep from Dava. We take note of what you said. Does anybody want to react to him? You heard him.
We agree.
Yeah, for sure. It's very important, very, very important. Another question? There at the back, yes.
In the region, you always get the farmers with some advice. And nowadays, the one guy would say, you need to go white rows, other guy would say narrow rows. But the newest trend is to say at the flowering stage, just the beginning of flowering stage for soybeans, it helps to give it some kind of these biofertilizers to help strengthen the plant's health, and that kind of helps it to resist sclerotia. Do you think there's any merit to this? Have you heard of trials? Have you seen it in the field? Because at this stage we need to do something to make it the impact less.
SP, we're going to give you that first question, and then Rikus, you're welcome.
Yeah, sure. So for the past few years, we've been doing a lot of work on the biological side. As Rikus and everybody said, it's for Sclerotinia, it's some of the worst trials to do because you never get it. The best control method for Sclerotinia is to put a Sclerotinia trial in a farmer's field, because then you're sure there's not going to be any problems. But yeah, last year we as a company actually got one of the first biologicals registered to spray as a foliar spray to control Sclerotinia, not just on soybeans but on canola as well. So there's been a lot of strides, especially within our company, and I know from Rikus is the multinational sides looking at the biologicals for the past few trends. The problem is with that is, on the biological side, we run into the same exact problems that the chemistry guys run into with all the regulations, with all the trial sites and that complications. And then on the biological side, we're using a biological product. So it is also dependent on environmental conditions, where your chemistry is usually quite fixed, quite stable in environmental conditions. To take a biological product over to a wide variety of areas, taking it over from soybeans in the eastern part of the country to sunflower on the western side of the country, it's quite dramatic climatic conditions. So there's a lot more R&D going into biological products to see that stability. And again, every year you try to do these trials, you end up not getting disease or in those specific areas, in those trials. So the process is a bit longer, but the past few years there's been strides. There are, like I said, from our side, one product inside being registered, that's Bacillus methyllotropicus, and we also actually also earlier this year handed in different biologicals for actually control of the Sclerotinia within the soil. So it's just the whole process of the development of the products is just so long, unfortunately.
Okay, Rikus.
Yeah, and in terms of having, it's always a good thing to have a strong and healthy plant, and if you can add something that can help, I do believe that. I think Sclerotinia, though, might be a little bit difficult because it's a bit of an opportunistic necrotrophic type of organism. So if you see where it attacks, it doesn't attack the healthy flower or the healthy plant. It attacks that flower that's already done its job and that's now dropped in that little stem. That's where it attacks the dead material, and then it grows into the plant. So you hear what I'm trying to say, that it's not going to change that too much.
I also think what's important to remember is when we look at biologicals, and I'm pro-sustainable looking at alternative options, we need to look at what activity is that biological playing. Is it microparasitizing and breaking down the melanin of the sclerotia, reducing the pressure in the field? Or is it inducing resistance mechanisms, to hopefully boost any losses? I just want to make a comment on the row width. We recently had a discussion with a colleague of mine from Dalmas, and he always says, you need to weigh up the cost benefit for yourself. If you're going to plant wider rows, and you're going to potentially, are you going to have less risk or not? Are you going to plant narrower rows, less risk or not? But if you plant wider rows, you're for certain going to have lower yield. So that's just something to keep in mind. And there's international research that's looked at that. The people that have filled in the survey, I will add that to it. But it shows that there isn't significant differences. It all is about the microclimate and what's actually happening within the canopy during that period. Yeah. And something that Derek says, this is our colleague from Dalmas, and it links with what Dr. Kloppers was saying now, is that we forget where we have Sclerotinia. You have a rotation system. Take out a map of your production area, or take your Google, take your phone, stand in the field where you found patches, mark it. Put a GPS pin there. Go and count how many plants out of 50 in that area had Sclerotinia. The next season you have planted maize, go and look there again and see if there are any apothecia there. Because that will give you an idea. And get on your knees, not only to pray, but to look for apothecia. That will really help you know the risk you have for the season that's going to follow.
Okay, thank you. Another question? Yes, Rolf. Mr. Rolf Kiesel from Paul Pietersburg.
Yes, thank you. You're also a farmer like our chairman here, or the leader of the discussion. Thanks, Joseph. Maybe not a question so much, just a comment, now that there weren't any other questions, on the control of Sclerotinia. Obviously, in the East, we've been struggling with this problem for a number of years already, not like you just anticipating it now. Personally, I mean, wide rows, narrow rows, and when I refer to wide rows, it's probably 90 centimeters and wider, at least 1 meter rows, 1.2 meter rows that you need to go to consistently control Sclerotinia. And yes, it used to be a catch-22 situation. You're already cutting your yield. Although some of the new cultivars, especially the long-grow cultivars, are compensating amazingly for wide rows. One farmer in my area, I'm not going to mention names, he's been controlling Sclerotinia with wide rows, and he averaged on his farm this year at 1.2 meter rows, 4.7 tons a hectare. It's amazing. So it is possible, and he says he had a little bit of Sclerotinia, but not commercially an impact. I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I've been controlling it chemically, and biologically with contents and also getting consistently, I'm on 76 centimeter rows, controlling it so that I can also say you've got to really look on my farm to find Sclerotinia. You're going to struggle to find some. But it also cost me, whereas the farm in my area, he's literally same climatic conditions, he's farming 25 kilometers from me. He's done the other approach and he hasn't got that chemical, and we're getting the same yield. So I'm going to do trials this year myself with the wider rows. Whereas previously, there is definitely some, maybe it was just this season now, that the long growers compensated for those wide rows. But yeah, it's interesting. But chemically, I've been able to control it the last 6-7 years. I've been successful with chemical and biological content specifically. I have been using on my farm. No-till compared to conventional. Sorry, I'm just going to say some things. I mean, talking from experience now. It's hopefully you don't mind. It's an open discussion. I've also been on no-till, and if you can create that gut of the cow on the top of your field, that biology, it eventually eats, whether it's with contents, whether it's just creating the environment for them to germinate, and then you actually neutralize the effect of the Sclerotinia. So definitely, but you need to go, not just no-till, cover crops, all these things, that because if you get a bit of a moist winter with a cover crop in the winter, we know Sclerotinia is a colder condition, and then they do germinate, and then there's suddenly not a host crop because there's only oat or something on the field, and then it's definitely there. I think there's more positive with a no-till creating that. I want to take your gut of a cow analysis on top of a field to biologically digest or just neutralize the effect of the Sclerotinia. Thank you. Maybe just thoughts for...
Appreciate it, Ralph, your experience. Thank you very much.
Ralph, if I may ask, are you planting shorter growers? And with your normal, narrow 76 row?
Yeah, I plant a range of from 4.0 to 6.4 about. That's what I traditionally planted, and the main reason being to spread the harvesting. Obviously, the determinant shorter grower seasons, they have a limit on yield. On my farm, I've not been able to go over 4.5 tons a hectare on them, no matter what I do, what special program I follow. Whereas the medium to longer growers, we've been able to go to the 5-ton categories. Yeah, I haven't tried the 7.2, and that's what I'll call him my neighbor 25 kilometers away. He's gone to 7.2 growth length at these wide rows, and as I said, 4.7 tons a hectare, and I'm really going to try it myself this coming season.
I'm definitely going to come and visit then.
Any more questions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, Jannie. Meneer Jan Botma, also a grain farmer from Botawil.
Just a question. How big is the contamination of sclerotia in seed, and kept seed and new seed? Because there's a lot of new farmers coming to this.
Who's going to answer that? Lisa? Microphone. Enriquez?
I think if you look at the SANSOR standards, it's very strict in terms of the crop. Soybeans is a 0 tolerance. Oh, because in soybeans you can really spot it fairly easily and take it out. Yeah, sunflower allows a little bit more because it's more difficult. And I think sometimes even the sclerotia that's in that seed, the small percentages that if you plant that in the field, you're probably going to plant it where it's not going to have an effect. And it's probably going to be the small ones that you spoke about, Lisa. That is probably less significant. So I don't think I don't think that is a big one. It could lead to the first introduction of a disease into an area that it's never been. Not that I've seen such an area. But I think that could be a kind of a seed, could be a way of transmitting it into an area that it's never been. But from season to season now, I think the effect is really minimal. But obviously, saying that also, look at your supply of your seed. Where does it come from? I mean, if you want to buy from the guy across the road and he doesn't have the cleaning equipment and he doesn't have the sensor standards on his side, you're taking a huge risk. I think, why do you want to start on a back foot?
Lisa?
For soybean, you can turn to page 15 of the Oilseed Focus magazine. And there's some work that an honors student did last year. And then I just shared a presentation that I think what Rikus is mentioning is maybe speaking to a slide that I presented at the SSPP. And I would like to show you that picture because it gives you an idea of the size that is allowed by Sansor and the government. So DAF allow a 4% tolerance. And what I'll do is, if you would like the presentation that I gave at SSPP, I recently published a paper, and I'd really like to say thank you to SAGL, PRF, OPORT, OAC, for funding, looking at the sclerotia and the grading, because that's where all that data came from. I didn't have to do extra work. I could take that and make sure that it's public, more easily accessible. It's on the website. But I think it's easier to read this than to have to sift through 10 years of data. So, I don't know, did it come through yet?
Yes, it did. You want
Great.
to share the whole
If you don't mind, I'm taking liberties now. I think this is why Joseph calls me Mrs. Sclerotinia.
Just give me a moment. Let me just get it.
And while she's looking at that, I think also what's happened, I think if you get your seed from a proper seed supplier, sunflower obviously comes with a good seed treatment, and we've done the work on that, and we can see that we can at least, it again is that a bit of that insurance policy against spreading the disease in a seed-borne way. But that will not protect you, obviously, from what happens in the field. It's also one of those difficult ones when we do seed treatment trials for registration. I can treat the seed as best as I could, but what happens in the field, that infection I can't control with the seed treatment, and that's very difficult sometimes to prove. So I think we need to do those glass cells and pot trials to register it, and then, because that will only address that part of the spread of the disease, but not the secondary infection that you get in the field.
So I'm just going to take be a little bit forward. So this is what Rikus was talking about, the fact that, I'm just going to use this thing, because I don't think this thing is happy with me. All right, so we can see the difference. This is not peanuts and raisins, it's my favorite comment. That's sclerotia and soybean. And next to it is sunflower and sclerotia. And it's much more difficult to see that in the sunflower. Now, this is a specialized media, and because of the lights, you cannot see the reaction that is happening. So I don't know if that can be... Can the light, by any chance, be... Thank you. Oh, yeah. Okay, so I don't know if you can see, but there's a yellow halo around that. And what happens is within 2 days, about 2 days, if there's infection in soybean seed, we can actually see, before there's even mycelium, whether is internally born. But this is actually the slide that Rikus was talking about. That is a soybean seed. Then they sieve it through. Then we have a sclerotia. It's a perfect disc. I don't know, that was just per toeval, per coincidence. And that is the smallest sieve size. So I haven't done a test, but if you go and look at the likelihood that that sclerotia is going to germinate, it's 1 millimeter. And produce apothecia that are going to cause significant infection, it's much less than larger sclerotia. I just wanted to point out that even though DAF allow 4% and Sansor permit 0.2%, everyone, if you've ever drunk a Panado, there's a risk. I think we can really thank Sansul for the effort that they've done to get it down to 0.2%.
Thank you, Lisa. Rolf, another question from you, and then we'll give that gentleman
Just a quick comment. As farmers, we normally say that the planter doesn't spread Sclerotinia, the harvester spreads the Sclerotinia.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you.
Chairman, now I just want to say that the only reason why we allow 0.2% is because nobody can guarantee zero. That is the only reason, because everybody is jumping on the seed analysis head for missing it. So that's the only reason why we put it there. Okay, the screening and the Celeste treatment should be enough. It won't, the problem is not through the seed. The problem is it comes with the wind. Nee. At the specific stage, when the triangle comes to the right point, nobody can throw it.
Thank you. Another question behind him?
Yeah, maybe just a comment. I think even the seed companies, they have very strict standards, even above 0.2. You know, they'll do a in-field type of screening or test before they even take in that seed to be processed. So there's a lot of control, and I think, like what you said, 0.2 is really just to protect the analyst, because at the end of the day, taking that sample is the luck of the draw. Even though we follow ISTA rules and try to take a representative sample as possible, at the end of the day, it's still a risk whether you're going to get that in the pan or not.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, there, Jonathan.
That work on the cattle feeding on the sclerotinia was fantastic. I just wanted to find out, would you think that if we had to, on other crops like soybeans, which other livestock like sheep are more utilized or could graze that, would that have the same effect? Could that be possible?
I'm actually not aware. Do cattle graze on sunflower? Do sheep graze on sunflower?
Soybeans.
Sorry. It's been a long day, y'all. They are sheep grazing on soybean?
Yes.
Okay. So soybean sclerotia are much smaller, and so are sheep's smaller than cattle. So there have been research. We have not personally looked at it, but I'm assuming we will see a similar trend. I will have an honours student do the scoop on sheep poop next year.
Sorry, just one last question. How many, generally in a wet year like we had this past year, infection amounts throughout the season of, let's say on soybeans specifically, how many infection periods were there through the crop cycle?
I don't know, maybe Rikus can also answer here, but I think that, so ascospores, once they have been liberated from the apothecia, can survive up to about 17 to 24 hours, they say. But if they're in a favorable environment and land on a susceptible host in a conducive environment, they're going to infect. And we've seen in our field trials, which we have successfully inoculated for fungicide evaluations in soybean. And what we've seen, we have natural and inoculated trials. And what we see is that the apothecia, it's almost like a 3-hour cycle that they do the puffing. But there's a researcher that we met at SASPP, and there's a physicist that wants to get involved with thunderstorms and I've been in field trials. I don't know, farmers are probably in your hair static from all the electricity and the pressure that builds, and they want to look at that impact on infection windows. So if you have flowering, senescing plants, you have an infection window. Maybe Dr. Kloppisch can.
Yeah, that is really the window. You know, when we spoke about the disease triangle, that to me is key. You know, when all those things come together, and that's weather and the host at that stage, which is flowering. So as soon as that flower goes, then you'll get that infection if the conditions are good. We must remember, though, that the disease can still spread in the row. So one plant can get infected by the ascospores, and you'll get the mycelium developing on the plant, but in the row then, just that touch means that the fungus can actually then grow and carry on in the row. And that can be significant if the weather conditions stay conducive for that.
Okay.
In soybeans, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, after this finished, we are going to have some cocktails and networking, and then we're going to have some more discussion. This is such an interesting topic, we can discuss it days on end. I just want the panel now. I'm a farmer. Outside, there's a lot of farmers that are going to have to plant this season. We are very excited. The soil profiles are full of moisture. The weather forecast looks like another above average rainfall season. So today here we have people from the media with us, Ms. Lisa Roberts, Charles van Rooyen, other people here. I would like us to wrap this up, this Sclerotinia session, with advice for planting season, in which Sclerotinia may be a problem. So if from SB, we can start from you, maybe just one sentence or two sentences. What advice can you give soybean and sunflower farmers which are concerned about possible Sclerotinia issues this season? What can you do now at this stage for the season that's going to come? What would be the important things to look at? Each of the panel, just a sentence or two, if you would like to, and then we can wrap this up. So we need some practical, quality advice on farm level. How should we handle this Sclerotinia issue for the season that's coming? And the people from the media, here's your summary for your articles. So write it so that us farmers can understand it, please. Thank you, SB.
Okay, so no stress on me for starting this off. So from my side is prevention is always better than a cure. So if you know you've got certain Sclerotinia pressure in a field this past season or the season before that, and you are going to plant a susceptible crop on that land, stay committed to a program to prevent that. So before you start your season, put that chemical spray into your program, into your cost, and go through with that program. Do not see later the season say, okay, the sprays are expensive. Just go through with it, because if you do not go through with your prevention plan and you get infection periods, first of all, this season is going to be a difficult one, but again, you're going to produce inoculum for the next season and the season behind that. So if you know you've got problems on your farm, stay committed to prevent the disease from occurring in the first place.
Thank you. Very good advice. Nikki?
Hi. Yeah, so I guess, it's hard because there's not a good correlation between Sclerotinia and planting date necessarily, at least in sunflower. But I guess you can make sure that your timing doesn't coincide with flowering at a cooler, wetter period. That's the best choice, but these things aren't always predictable. But we know that if you're heading into March, February, we're going to get much cooler weather, and that's probably going to be worse if you're flowering at that stage. So think about when the flowering is going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
So my advice for sunflower and soybean farmers is a little bit different. I think soybean producers have potentially a benefit. If you know you have a product that works for you, make sure that you get your timing right, like SBS said. It's really critical, and make sure that you're getting sufficient penetration in the canopy. But a step before that is, if you know you have cultivars that are working in your production system, utilize those tools. We do not have complete resistance in South Africa. We do not even have partial resistance in South Africa. And speak to one another. Just like Rolf has made the perfect example. Try it out. I'm not a producer, but maybe Rolf can say he wouldn't all of a sudden swap to now doing exactly what his neighbor's doing. He said he's going to do A, test it out. So that's my advice. Test out. If you see you have producers within the same region that are successful in managing and getting the yields, find out what cultivars they are planting and test it out. Don't convert your whole production system first. Use what's working for you and map out your history. Map out when you see Sclerotinia. It's one of the most important things you can do for your future self.
Just a follow-on question, Lisa. For us, maybe we can have a choice of timing when we plant soybeans. End of October, beginning of November, middle November, end of November, December. We've seen Nikki's research into sunflower. Maybe what about timing of planting?
So I have not done a study like Nikki has extensively, but from our multi-season cultivar evaluations on the soybean with this national cultivar trials in Clocolan, Delmas and Greytown. So those are the three regions that, just environment-wise it's important to remember. We haven't seen any correlations with planting dates and more or less Sclerotinia. It's driven by the weather and the season. Actually, the planting date it's about it's the flowering time. And that's obviously determined by when you plant and your environment. But, ultimately, it's driven by the flowering time. So, know your cultivars. Are you doing determinate or indeterminate growers? That's important, and know what's working in your region. I think Annelie is also someone that can say, in all of your different localities, what have you seen?
Okay.
No correlation. And that's more field trial experience than me.
Okay, so basically you're saying pray for good weather when your soybeans are flowering.
Yep. Yeah, I think Esbia maybe hit the nail on the head. Follow through.
Okay. No, good advice. Thank you. Nelia?
So as we move down the line, it becomes more difficult, right? I would say stagger. So however you can, stagger the cultivars that you use across different crops as well. So whether it's soybeans, sunflowers, maize, stagger the rotation that you do and the timing of planting that you do, and also the length of growers that you have. That you don't have all of your crop actually flowering at exactly the same time. That gives you a window to actually stagger your risk as well. So if there's any possibility to differentiate between the type of cultivars that you use and that you have a different window of flowering, that might also spread your risk a little bit. Thanks.
Thank you. Good advice. Rikus?
So I can just summarize what all of them said. But really don't try and control the disease. Try and manage the disease would be my answer. And I think it's also... It's maybe a very old one. Everybody knows it. There is no silver bullet for this one, definitely. Don't think you're going to solve this issue with one solution. You have to do a lot of good things. If you have a history now of a Sclerotinia in this particular field, you know exactly which those was, then go to something like Contans and try and reduce the inoculum to start with. Then you select your cultivars, and I think Nelia said it quite well. Niku also did a lot of work, Niku Barnard, on the cultivars, and just spread that risk, in terms of quicker, so that they don't flower at the same time. Easier said in soybeans than in sunflower, because that's a small window. And then look at your chemistry. I think there's a big value in chemistry, and we're going to do our best to get the best products in and get them registered and done. I still believe those ascospores are actually little sissies. They are thin-walled spores. If we can do a proper scouting and do a good preventative spray, we can manage it with fungicide as well. But then penetrate the canopy, as you said, and just do it timelessly. I think there's a lot of value in it. But all in all, said, do everything well. Start with your good seed. A lot of things.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, we've been privileged to have possibly the best minds on this issue here with us today. And I'd like you to put a hand together and let's thank the panel for their... And then I'll hand over to Mr. Gerard Keon to just wrap up and do the conclusion for us. Thank you, Gerard.